My topic is how to defeat the trans movement, and ultimately I think there are incredibly important aspects of this fight, and most of them have actually all been covered. We've covered academia, we've covered the medical research and the expertise, and we've covered the exposure and the storytelling here. But ultimately, those aspects make this a fight. They allow us the opportunity to fight by bringing this exposure and exposing the harm and the threats that this issue of transgenderism is. What I'm getting at is that I think that politics is where we win or lose this fight. Politics is not downstream of culture. If that were the case, then transgenderism would not be a thing. It would, let alone a major crisis facing this nation, as most Americans reject the tenets of transgenderism and its goals. Politics instead is part of the culture, especially here in America. It's how our founders designed our system. Political power is how the left has made such political progress on this issue, changing anti-discrimination laws, federal policies, primary and secondary education curriculum, investing tax dollars into transgender experiments and procedures. It was politics, our laws, that made transgenderism such an enormous deal in this country. And it will be through politics is how we'll change this. The first step in winning any political battle is to take a sober look at the reality of your situation. And the reality of our situation is that almost all of America's elite institutions are completely against us. The professional associations, academia, hospitals, NGOs, Wall Street, you name it, all are opposed to our goals. Our strongest grounds, in fact, are with the American people, also known as voters, the vast majority of which oppose the tenets of transgenderism and their goals and public policies. The polling on this issue, we've done, APP is a C3, we're a C4, and we have a super PAC, and we've done a lot of polling on this, and it's actually incredibly boring because of how predictable it is. We're seeing margins of 2 to 1, 3 to 1, and if you're testing the sports angle or the surgeries angle or the puberty blocker angle, the American people are against this, and it's where our grounds are strongest. In terms of elites, there is one group where we have a fighting chance, our elected officials, specifically Republicans. Republicans are beginning to see the political advantages of fighting the trans agenda. In fact, earlier this year, APP launched our Big Family Pledge, which in part calls on politicians to pledge to ban these types of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and transgender treatments for children. 159 federal candidates have signed this. It's imperative that the next presidential candidate recognizes transgenderism for both the threat that it poses to America's future, but also the political opportunity that opposing this agenda offers to Republicans. Politics is the most important fight to engage in, not just because it is where our best opportunity lies, but because right now our own government is using the full force and weight of civil rights law to force transgenderism on America in our schools, workplaces, military, health system, and everywhere else. Politics has been what has actually turned the tide on this trans fight, I would argue. If you rewind back to 2015, the LGBT movement had achieved victories that were never seen before. Gay marriage, and then in 2016, real quick aside, we had a group of donors that met with the RNC chairman, Reince Priebus, in 2015, and they asked him what the RNC would be doing on marriage. And his response was very telling with where the GOP had been, or was heading, which was, when someone asks me about marriage, I tell them that my wife and I have been married for 15 years and we're very happy. Next question. They weren't willing to engage in any of these fights in the LGBT movement. Later that year, Jeb Bush was openly discussing with his team a Republican version of the Equality Act as part of his presidential campaign. 2016, Pat McCrory, governor of North Carolina, loses a slim election by less than 10,000 votes after passing a bathroom bill and having the LGBT movement dump in over $25 million against him in his election campaign. But the tide started to turn in 2019 and 2020. American Principles Project spent $600,000 in Kentucky's governor's race with Matt Bevin versus Andy Beshear. We ran ads specifically on women's sports. And with that $600,000, we found that we shifted nearly 26,000 votes towards Matt Bevin, who had pledged to protect women's sports. APP then spent another $7.5 million on the issue in 2020 and shifted nearly 100,000 votes across the swing states. After this influx of campaign spending against LGBT issues, we have seen 19 states pass laws to protect girls' sports and 5 states currently that have passed laws to protect children from transgender medical procedures. It's not enough for politicians to know that an issue is causing damage or harm to America. They have to also know that they won't lose their election for taking a stand, and even more importantly, they need to know that they will not be alone in the fight and they will have authentic political support once they step into the arena. That's why APP is going to be spending $10 million in the midterms this year, enacting a political price against leftists for their radicalism on transgenderism, parental rights, and grooming children sexually in schools. We have followed a very simple formula for turning this fight around, and we've had a lot of help. I'm not trying to take total credit for this, sorry. But the formula is very simple, and it's what every special interest group does. The first step is to set the agenda and recruit political support for that agenda. Find politicians that are willing to publicly pledge to enact that agenda. And then step 2 is to win your campaigns and elections with these guys and get them into office. You win the campaigns and elections by focusing on the issues where the best political opportunities are. And right now, we've found that there are 4 issues that are crucial to building a winning coalition. The first is women's sports. This issue works best primarily with suburban and Democrat-leaning women. Child mutilation, another issue that fires up the base. It also increases turnout and works with some independent voters. Indoctrination in schools, this actually works best with soft Democrats, independents, and soft Republicans. And obviously, grooming children on sexual matters in schools, that also works with soft Democrats, independents, and soft Republicans. The third step, and this is the most critical one because it's where Republicans and conservatives mostly fall short, is actually enacting the agenda once in office. Legislative opportunities, lost my place. I'm not used to writing out my speeches, I'm used to just winging it. The importance of actually enacting your legislative agenda is important for a critical reason. Not only does it keep your state from trending blue, it signals to the blue state voters who are fleeing the poor economies of California, New York, Illinois, that they're going to have to choose between their social values and their economy. And you can keep a lot of blue state voters out. This 3-step process, we recommend to rinse, wash, and repeat and keep moving the ball forward. On top of all of this, from the legislation that you'll pass, restricting this and banning it, we'll also be able to pass legislation that allows these poor children, these poor individuals who have been exploited by big pharma, our healthcare industry, and everyone else to sue for malpractice lawsuits. Justice for the exploited, bankruptcy for the corrupt, and unsustainable increases in medical liability insurance will be a sure thing to kill this terrible and horrific industry. So those are the solutions that I have right now. I'm sure there's more out there. Thank you, guys.